Okay, this is an interesting webinar considering the time that we're in. I think most of us would agree not having access to a gym or whatever has maybe affected our normal routines as far as what we do for health. And so I want to make sure that this is important to cover at any point. Understanding weight and how that relates to metabolism is super important. But as we kind of, and I joke about this a little bit, but I want to make sure that we don't come out of this isolation all looking like we put on 20 extra pounds, of course. So we're going to go through some stuff today. I want you to understand what the real problem here is. So again, this is a popular webinar. Every time I've done this one or even a live workshop, it's been popular. Everyone wants to know how to lose weight. But the reason I crossed out weight in the title and put metabolism here is because this has your weight. Your weight is a byproduct of your health, and especially when it comes to our metabolism. So I want to make sure that we go through this tonight. You understand the real problem here. I want to make sure that you have got steps to be able to take action to turn this around. And then, of course, share this information and help other people. So again, our key here is your weight needs to be the byproduct of a healthy metabolism. It shouldn't be the main thing that you focus on. If you worry about your metabolism, your weight will, for most of us, will drop. It will be where it should. We're so focused on the weight that so many of us do the wrong stuff to try and get there. Let me skip slides here. So we're going to go through 11 big ideas here tonight. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. We're really going to start by looking at our mindset, make sure that our mindset is in the right area here. Then we're going to talk about the things that you need to understand about metabolism. And then we're going to hopefully, again, give you some tools, both actual to implement in your lives and then even mental tools to be able to make sure that we make these changes and make them successfully. So number one thing we're going to go through here is just some quick stats. When we look at obesity, this is such a massive problem. This used to be kind of unique to the West, but this is becoming just a massive problem around the world. If we look worldwide, we have 600 million obese, which is an official diagnosis number of people. We have 2 billion people that are overweight. We're going to spend over the next 20 years about $47 trillion. My guess is that this is way low because our number of diagnosis of basically overweight and obese is an exponential increase. So it's not just this linear thing where every year we get more and more and more. This is becoming exponential. That means that it's growing. The rate of growth is increasing every single year. So the estimates conservatively that we're going to spend $47 trillion over the next 20 years when it comes to kind of the health consequences of our obesity. Another interesting stat here, this is going to tie it into a little bit, but I just think this is interesting, that 90% of the food that you find in grocery stores is produced by 10 companies. And if those 10 companies don't have your health in mind, we can have some pretty nasty consequences when it comes to that. As we bring these stats, I think sometimes we look at stats and we hear numbers like 600 million people that are obese and, 2 billion people that are overweight. It seems so big. So I want to break this down to us individually. And there's some interesting things that we can use to measure that are really useful when it comes to whether we're obese, whether we're overweight. And the easiest thing to do is to look at your weight. And there's 2 ways to do this. And so the research shows that men, if we are over 40 inches in our waist circumference, that's a problem, that we're in what we call over-fat. It might not be overweight, it might not be obese, but we're heading into the danger zone, that we're trending in the wrong direction. For women, it's about 35 inches. So the easiest way is to look at your pant size and look at the inches on your pant size. So there's some research being done using that as a good criteria to kind of determine whether, which of these categories you fit in. My favorite, because this personalizes this is a little bit more, was introduced by a guy named Phil Maffetone, who's done a lot of research into this. But basically, one of the good calculations that you can use is to look at your waist height ratio. So if you take your height and divide that by your waist circumference, it should be 0.5 or ideally less than 0.5. So for example, I'm 5'10", so I just put this as an example. If you're a 5'10" male, your waist circumference, you shouldn't be wearing pants or at least your waist circumference, if you're wearing Pants That Fit Right, should be less than 35 inches. That's a good measurement for health. If it's, oops, pardon me. How do I go back? There we go. For a female that's 5'5", we should not have a waist circumference that's greater than 32.5 inches. So this is personal for you guys to look at. If you fall in one of those categories, now we're starting to get into a problem where this isn't just I might not look good on a beach. This has actual real health consequences for the rest of our lives, basically. If we keep going, there's two ways to look at fat. What's really interesting is that, and this is it ties into the waist circumference thing, but we can look at fat in two different ways. There's what we call subcutaneous fat, which is this is kind of fat that's tend to be spreading all over the body. It can collect more in the rear end. It gives us a pear shape. And what's really interesting is that this subcutaneous type fat is not dangerous at all. And in fact, research shows that it's protective against disease, at least to a certain point. So that means that, we don't have to be rail thin, that having a good amount of subcutaneous fat in our body actually is protective against disease. And one of the things that, again, just so you know a little bit about me, when we come at weight, when we come at metabolism, I don't care how you look on a beach. What we care about is how your weight or the types of fat that you have in your body will affect longevity and the quality of life that you have, the amount of disease, your morbidity, and your mortality. How long are you going to live and how much disease are you living with? Okay, so subcutaneous fat is good fat, and ideally we should be aiming at about 80% of our fat should be this type of fat. Again, it's pretty easy to look in a mirror and see what type of body shape that we have. The second type of fat, this is the dangerous fat. You guys have all heard this term of visceral fat. This is belly fat. This gives us an apple shape where we get really thick in the middle. The fat gets concentrated in the midsection. It gets concentrated. It kind of covers all of our internal organs. This is very, very, very predictive of disease rates, not just diabetes. We're talking heart disease, cancer, mental disorders, etc., and then certainly early death. And so look at yourself again. If your waist circumference is small, but you maybe have some weight on you, it tends to be subcutaneous. It's that visceral fat that's going to expand our waist and will really mess up those ratios that we just talked about. Uh-oh. I don't know why we're missing a slide there. Let me see what this. Oh, okay. You guys can't see that. I actually had a video there that I don't think that worked correctly, but so that's big idea number one. Big idea number two is seeing the gorilla in the room. And it won't let me play the video, but the video that I wanted to show for you is, some of you may have seen this video where it's basically a study that was done. I think it was at Harvard. Anyway, they had a group of people in the room wearing white shirts, and you had to watch the number of times that they jumped up and down or did jumping jacks or something like that. In the middle of this, and there's viewers that are watching this, and in the middle of this, you're keeping track of these people in white shirts. This guy in a gorilla costume comes out, and he starts beating his chest and then walks right through the group of people and off camera. And at the end of the study, what they asked the participants was, how many of you saw the gorilla walking through this group of white people? And it was less than half. Notice this big ridiculous gorilla walking through this other group of 5 or 6 white people or people in white t-shirts doing jumping jacks. The point of this is that if we don't know, like when you watch it again, it's so blatantly obvious that you cannot help but see it. But if you're not focused on it, you're going to miss it. And the big idea here is for us to actually take a step back and to look at kind of our lifestyles and to look at where we are as a society with the types of food that we have. We're going to go through some crazy stats coming up, but I think so many people look around and like, we're going to go through some things here that you're going to maybe think I'm a renegade or a little bit hardcore tonight, but I think we're just so used to living life the way that they do, especially we're going to talk a lot about sugar and grains and flour tonight and how really terrible they are for your metabolism. And there's going to be things that are running through your mind tonight. I promise you're going to say things like, oh, is it really that bad? Like, I mean, this stuff is everywhere. It can't really be that bad. Or I eat better than most people. Or this is just, this is kind of what we do. This should be the normal thing, or everyone does it. But the reality is that if you want to make changes with your health, We cannot do the same thing that everyone does. We cannot do the same thing that we've done in the past. If we keep living the same way that we've lived up until this point, it's crazy for us to expect that we're going to get different results from that. You know, after my little kids, t-ball games or baseball games, it was like tradition even for us to go to the little food shack, as we got pictured here, and, you know, for my son to get a pop after, or at least all his friends do, or grab a chocolate bar. You know, even in hospitals, I was adjusting a little baby in a hospital a couple months ago, and the food choice in the hospital, the restaurant in the bottom of this hospital, was McDonald's. And I'm like, man, like, we're going to go through some things tonight that, you know, there's different people have different theories on. Some people agree with what I'm going to talk about. Some people disagree, but everyone agrees. Like, there's no one that doubts this, that the worst thing that we can do for diseases like diabetes and insulin resistance and heart disease and cancer is to eat more processed, you know, preservative-ridden, ladled food, basically, more breads, etc. And I just think, like, when you see McDonald's on every street corner, when you see it in hospitals, even Subway is the healthy choice now. In our 212 medical building, just right south of our office, we have Subway, which if you watch the TV commercials, you'd think that Subway was health food. And just because you put some cucumbers on your, you know, pastrami sandwich doesn't mean it's healthy. And this is the world that we're living in. And so we really need a mindset shift. And I just want you guys, I want to point this out, because the way that we do things here is backwards, it's bizarre, and it's the exact reason we have so much trouble losing weight. We have so much obesity and so many problems with this in this country, and of course growing around the world. Okay, so let's jump into metabolism here. So big idea number 3. We have been taught forever, basically, that if you want to lose weight, that we just simply have to eat less calories than we take in, right? If I was asked for a show of hands right now and you guys raise your hand, this is what we're taught, right? We just have, if you want to lose weight, you have to burn more calories than you eat. That's called the energy balance theory. And this is an old approach. It's still taught today. This is literally, I took nutrition classes even in chiropractic college, which we don't even get nutrition classes in medical school. It's like 45 minutes of nutrition you get, and I'm not even kidding about that. But we're taught that basically, you know, weight is it's a byproduct of too many calories. If you're not burning them by the end of the day, you're just going to store those calories, and that's what turns into fat. And there is some truth to that. You cannot eat an infinite amount of calories and have that not cause problems, but it is certainly not the whole story, and we're going to get into that in a second. What I'm going to teach you guys tonight is something called the energy, or the metabolic theory, or the metabolism theory, or even some people call it the hormone theory of metabolism. And basically, what we're going to talk about tonight is that a calorie is not a calorie. That a calorie coming from sugar is very different in the human body than a calorie coming from another food choice like protein or even fat. Okay, it's all about how those calories affect what your hormones are doing in your body. Okay, we have taught people this for years, that weight has so much to do with hormones, and we're going to talk about some really specific hormones today. Insulin, which I'm sure everyone on this call has heard of. Leptin, most people have not heard of these things. They're the 2 easiest things to understand, that, and even other hormones we'll get into. But if your hormones are out of balance, if you have the wrong hormones floating around inside of your body, we're never going to get there. You'll never be able to lose weight. So again, the metabolism theory is what we're gonna hit tonight. And just so you know what the word metabolism means, metabolism basically it means how your body changes energy sources. So if you break the word down, it's to change something. And so what we're changing here is the food that you're putting in your body through the use of oxygen and giving you energy. And it's so how this metabolism happens in your body affects what types of, whether you're going to be a fat burner or a fat storer. Okay. To kind of nail this point home here, I want you to remember this. Okay, so big idea number 4. Remember this: 150 equals 7x. Tattoo this on your brain. Robert Lustig is the name that you're seeing on the screen here. He's a endocrinologist at UCSF. He did a study a while ago, and basically had groups of participants, two groups of participants. In one group, he raised the average amount of calories that they ate by 150. So didn't matter what the food source was, just wasn't sugar. It was he tried a bunch of different things, but he raised the overall calorie intake by 150 calories compared to what they were normally eating. What he found with that group was that their risk of diabetes was not affected, that they didn't have any more risk, any more insulin changes, any more risk of developing diabetes than the control group that just didn't do anything, kept eating their normal diet, okay? He had another group, and he fed those people 150 extra calories in their diet, but it came in the form of sugar, for example, in a can of Coke. In that group had a 700% or a 7-fold increase in their risk of developing diabetes. So if a calorie was just a calorie, if it did not matter the type of calories that you put in your body to lose weight, this should have never happened. It shouldn't have made a single difference. That group that got 150 extra calories from sugar should have had the exact same increase in risk, or none, because the other group didn't, as the group who increased calories. That should be identical because they both increase the same number of calories. It's not what happened. It was a massive increase in that risk of diabetes in the sugar group. Sugar is not just empty. You've heard this before, that sugar is just an empty calorie, meaning it's a calorie that has no nutrients tied to it. Sugar is not an empty calorie. It is a toxic calorie. I'm going to show you what this does to the hormone system in your body, and how this will just make it impossible for you to lose weight. And so he wrote this book. Robert Lustig wrote this book called Fat Chance, and in this book it said, and this is what's highlighted in red down at the bottom here, it said if you had any residual doubt about a calorie is not a calorie, this analysis should remove it. Sugar is more dangerous than its calories. Sugar is a toxin, plain and simple. Okay. Again, if we go back to the gorilla in the room, next time you're at the hospital, I want you guys to look and see how many Coke dispensers, how many pop dispensers they have. Go to the cancer ward and look at the number of Coke dispensers or pop dispensers that they have. We even have them in schools. Like, it's crazy. This is literally crazy that we're doing this, because it is one of the most damaging, dangerous things, sugar, that we can be putting in our bodies when it comes to our health. So let's dive into some hormones a little bit more here. So big idea, number 5, and I just want to make sure I don't see any hands up here. Hopefully, I've muted everyone. I've got some people saying they can hear some things, but I've muted everyone again in case there was any unmuted stuff. So there are any unmuted people here. Okay, so big idea number 5, insulin. This is your metabolic key. This is the big one. So everyone knows, hopefully, if not, we're going to review this. The role of insulin, we're really taught that insulin basically clears sugar from your blood. Now, the big thing I want you to know is that insulin does not just clear sugar, it clears anything from your blood. Insulin is a storage hormone, okay? So this is where the metabolic or the energy balance theory is a little bit true, that the more calories that you eat, the more work insulin has to do in storing that stuff. But sugar is the big trigger for insulin. And so insulin is going to take excess glucose. You're going to burn. Glucose is the main fuel source for your body. At least for our discussion tonight, we can start talking about ketones. We won't do that tonight in a later date, but your body can run off glucose as an energy source, which is a simple form of sugar. And so insulin, whenever you eat sugar, whenever you eat grains, whenever you eat flour and bread, whatever, it turns into glucose and it gets into your blood. And you're going to burn some of that with every move you make, every time you move a muscle, when you breathe, but the excess is going to get stored, and it gets stored in fat cells as fat. Okay, so insulin's job is to sweep, as the picture shows, any excess glucose into your fat storage cells. You cannot store anything in fat without insulin. Insulin is the thing that stores everything, specifically glucose, in your fat cells. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If you have too much insulin floating around in your body, you're going to be in a storage mode. It will be impossible for you to burn fat because the hormones are constantly storing stuff in your fat. You cannot take stuff out of fat storage if insulin is there putting it in. I hope that makes sense to everyone, and we will come back to that in a little bit. I want you guys to also understand something about what's called the glycemic index. And the glycemic index is a rating that describes how quickly the foods that you eat are at least releasing glucose into your bloodstream. And so things that have a high glycemic index dump a lot of sugar into your bloodstream really quickly. When that happens, your body releases a ton of insulin to help store that extra sugar into your fat cells. Things that are a lower glycemic index, like the yellow line shows, this would be things like zucchini and nuts and protein. They release stuff slower into your bloodstream, and so your body does not have to release as much insulin to store that stuff. Okay, so what we are going to talk a lot about tonight is how dangerous the things that have a high glycemic index are. Even things that are healthy for us, like fruit, can have high glycemic indexes, and if we are already insulin resistant, can create problems with all of this. Now, I just used the term insulin resistance, and what we should talk about that a little bit. If your body is constantly living in this state where you're getting big spikes in blood glucose and then it drops back down, your body has to release a ton of insulin all the time. Over time, if you're releasing a ton of insulin, the cells of your body stop listening to insulin because it can be annoying to the cells of your body. I won't go into more detail than that. But if your fat cells stop listening to insulin, your pancreas will start releasing even more. And so when you become insulin resistant, your body has to release even more insulin than it normally does to store everything in your fat cells. And again, now you're in a state where it's even harder to begin to lose weight. This is when you get into the overweight and the obese categories, this is generally what's going on. And this is why insulin resistance is such a stinking problem. Okay, so just as kind of in your minds here, I can't have you guys answer all of this. The picture on the top left is a chocolate bar. We got a loaf of whole grain bread. We've got a banana bottom left, and we've got pure simple table sugar bottom right. So if you guys were to guess what has the highest glycemic index in all of this, put a check mark by, or why don't you guys do this if you've got, that's right, you guys don't have a copy of this. Well, in your minds, rate these things really quick. So I want you guys to think out of all these things on here, what's got the highest glycemic index? I'll give you 1 second to do it. So I can see a bunch of people here on my screen, not everyone certainly, but a bunch of people. So how many of you, by a show of hands, would, at least those that I can see, how many of you would have rated the chocolate bar as the highest glycemic index? Hands up. That's got to be the worst for you, right? What about the sugar? Okay, pure sugar. Yep, that's what I would have guessed. The banana, that's got to be dead last, right? Hands up for the banana. What about hands up for the bread? Okay, we got some people there. Maybe heard me talk before. Good job. So here's what's crazy. Interestingly enough, the banana has the lowest glycemic index at 54. Okay, so probably not a surprise. That's healthy. Bananas got lots of fat in them that can help slow that down. There is small amounts of protein in bananas that can help slow glucose, lower the glycemic index and slower insulin response. The chocolate bar was only 1 point higher. It's rated at 55 glycemic index. Table sugar, 68. The bread, depending on the type of bread, between 71 and 75. Okay, the bread has the highest glycemic index out of all those things listed there. Now, a little bit later, we're going to get back to this and talk about why that is. But the bread and the sugar will jack up your insulin levels more than even a chocolate bar. And the reason a chocolate bar didn't is because it had nuts in it and some protein in it that helps slow the insulin response down. Okay, that's hopefully a little bit of a surprise for you guys. So let's talk about the other big hormone here. This is the one most people don't know about. This is called leptin. Insulin affects leptin. So you have to know this, that insulin and leptin, these two hormones, are very much related. Leptin is a hormone. It's produced by fat cells. Basically, the job of leptin is to tell your brain that you are full. So as insulin is storing stuff into your fat cells, those fat cells are releasing leptin, and this is telling your brain that you're full, which hopefully will turn your eating off. Okay, so when you release leptin, if the system works correctly, this is giving you that feeling of satiation and this feeling of full. Okay, the problem is that high insulin levels over time will disrupt leptin function. It actually stops the fat cells from releasing leptin. And so even though your body has constantly, you could be eating a ton of food and you're constantly storing stuff into those fat cells, you're not releasing leptin anymore, which stops it stops that feeling of fullness, and you feel like you're starving all the time, right? So we have people that have gone through some weight loss programs that we put together for them, and it's one of the questions that we ask. And a lot of people that have problems with weight, they can eat a full meal, but they're always hungry, right? Hopefully we don't have too many people on the line that feel that way, but if that's the case, most likely what's happening is that it's an insulin problem that's disrupted leptin release. And so the hormone that is telling you that you're full when you're done eating is not being released, and you're gonna feel like you're starving all the time, okay? It will be very hard. There's only so much willpower we have. And so you can understand and you can try and cut calories all you want, but if you're not getting leptin to your brain, you're going to fail eventually, because no one's got that enough willpower to constantly not eat and to feel like they're starving. You're going to start reaching for foods. And generally, we start reaching for foods that give us the quickest insulin or the quickest blood sugar spike, which is things like flour, bread, sugars, ice creams, etc. Okay? So if you solve high insulin issues, your metabolism changes, and fat loss becomes so much easier because you stop. There's two things that happen here. Again, you stop storing stuff in fat cells so often, right? And again, if you're insulin resistant and you're releasing a ton of insulin all the time, even if you changed your diet and started to calorie restrict, all those calories are getting stored in fat, right? Because you have insulin floating around in your bloodstream. If you fix your high insulin levels, you'll fix your metabolism by stopping fat storage, and you'll start releasing leptin again, which means you can eat less calories and feel fuller, and fat loss becomes so much easier at that point. Okay, big idea number 6. I'm gonna rip on sugar tonight, guys. Sorry, this is killing everyone. Case Against Sugar. This was actually a book that was written by a guy named Gary Taubes, who's just done years of research into this. I've heard him on podcasts, and I've heard him do some debates against people who support this, the energy balance theory of metabolism. And you just have to ignore research to be down that road right now. But I encourage all of you guys to grab his book, The Case Against Sugar. Read this book. It is so fascinating to understand what's going on. And in this book, he talks about when we look at all these Western diseases, when we look at cancer is the #1 killer, heart disease is #2, diabetes and the sequelae, that's #3, leads to neuropathy, leads to inflammation, leads to MS, leads to all of these different things. The one thing that we can find in common with all of these diseases is an insulin resistance, is someone who's dealing with insulin, sensitivity issues. So they've got insulin issue. So if we know that insulin is around, high insulin levels are around all the time or almost all the time with these Western diseases, it makes sense for us to look at, okay, what's causing this insulin resistance? And we know without a doubt that sugar and flour, and again, we're going to get into some interesting stuff a little bit later, but sugar and flour, they are the culprits of insulin resistance. And we know that insulin resistance is associated with all of our Western diseases. So if we want to actually solve all the Western diseases, I half the time don't think people are actually interested in that. I think that we make too much money off sick people, taking medications for the rest of their life, dealing with cancer, dealing with heart disease, dealing with diabetes. There's no money to be made off you not eating as much bread and flour and sugar as you are. And so little time is spent on this. But there is a direct link, a logical link, that if we can decrease eating this, putting these types of foods in our body, we can start to solve our insulin issues. We're going to see changes with the Western diseases tend to be called diseases of lifestyle because they're related to choices that we make. The answer is not insulin shots. The answer is not more high blood pressure medication or more cholesterol medication. It's not working. We have just as much Western diseases now as we ever have. The solution has to be in dealing with the causes of these things, and it's so simple. Again, very few people, right? No, we're not going to make money off of you by not eating, fruits, vegetables, or grains and sugars, and eating instead more fruits and vegetables. So if we look at some sugar consumption, consumption of added sugar has totally skyrocketed, over the last 100 years. It's been about 60 years, 70 years that it's gone really through the roof. When we talk about added sugar, there's a difference between sugar that's found in a fruit. And again, some of those fruits can have a high glycemic index, but that sugar is safer than what we call added sugar. This is extra sugar that's been added to our foods. In 1830, we consumed an average about 11, this is per person, for an adult, we consumed about 11 pounds of sugar per person per year. Today, we consume on average over 150 pounds of sugar a year. Guys, that's crazy. 150 pounds. We've gone, 15-fold on the amount of sugar that we're eating. This is all added sugar. You're not eating more grapes. You're not eating more fruits that's causing this. This is all coming from grains, pastas, etc., and then strict sugar. And what's worse is what we drink, right? The worst thing is Coke. It's pop. We'll get into that in a second here. So here's what you should be consuming. So when you look at added sugar, these are numbers that you can look at. These are numbers that you can watch. The maximum daily consumption for a male, an adult male, is about 35 grams of sugar. So when you start to look at your packaging, the food packaging, with the added sugar, add this up throughout the day, and the maximum that you should be eating is 35 grams for a male. For females, it's about 25 grams, the maximum amount per day. One single can of Coke, one single can of Mountain Dew, one single can of Sprite, a can of root beer. If it's not diet's got its whole own host of problems here, but it's about 39 grams of Coke 39 grams of sugar in one can of Coke. If you have one can of Coke a day, that is the maximum amount of sugar that you can be, and you're already over for a male, and over by a lot if you're a female. One candy bar has about 20 grams. I'm Canadian, so calling it a candy bar is just weird to me. We call them chocolate bars. Even if they're not chocolate in Canada, we call them chocolate bars. So I'm trying to become assimilated, but it's not easy. A latte, sorry everyone, do not hate me. A latte is about 25 grams of added sugar. So if you're getting a latte every day and you're having a can of Coke in the afternoon, you're just blowing yourself up. Even our health foods, right? A Cliff Bar. Guys, for years, we bought Cliff Bars and gave them to our kids. I'm not saying that this is the worst snack in the world, but even a Cliff Bar has 9 grams of sugar in it. And again, you can have added sugar. You just have to watch what you're putting in your body. A glass of orange juice, 21 grams of sugar, right? So we, again, think that's healthy. We're going to give this to our kids in the morning for breakfast. I always tell parents, if you're giving your kids orange juice, get the stuff with the pulp in it. Why? Because it's got fiber in it. Fiber helps lower the glycemic index. And 2, water it down. Water it down. You're getting concentrated juice. You could, I don't even know. How many oranges would you have to squeeze to make 1 glass of orange juice? How many do you think? 4 maybe? 6? I don't know what it is. You would not sit down and eat 6 oranges all at once. But we're doing that first thing in the morning, usually with our cereal, cornflakes, and toast or whatever. So we have to watch that. Gatorade, even Gatorade, health drink, or a sports drink rather, has got 36 grams of sugar in it. Again, they make stuff now that has sucralose in it and different types of sugar additives in it or sugar replacements. They have got their own issues. But add this stuff up, guys. So watch and see where you're at with this. And keep track for a little while and see what's going on. Okay. Here's another case against sugar. So is sugar a food or a drug? So the top picture on the left is cocaine. The top picture on the right is heroin. The picture bottom left is sugar, and the picture bottom right is flour. So here's what's really interesting. And the reason flour is so bad, the reason sugar is so bad, it's because they're refined. if you were to, and people do this, I'm not recommending this, but if you were to go to the Andes and go climb some of the mountains there, you'll see people all the time chewing on coca leaves. And apparently you get a little bit of a mild buzz off of this, maybe like a little bit of nicotine or whatever, but you certainly don't get high like you would with cocaine. Heroin comes from poppies, right? You could eat a boatload of poppies and not, get the effects that you would with heroin. Where these things become problematic is when they are refined down. And it's the same thing with sugar. It's the same thing with flour. The amount of grain that you would have, like whole grain that you would have to eat to get flour, it's so refined down that you're getting all of the bad stuff in a sugar cane or in a bundle of, a bushel of wheat, concentrated down. And that's where the problem with this is. What's really interesting is that they've done MRIs, brain imaging of people on cocaine, of people on heroin, then of people that take sugar, eat sugar and flour, and all four of those substances light up a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is your pleasure centers in your brain. And when this nucleus accumbens gets stimulated artificially, you get addicted to it. And that's where some of the addictive nature of these drugs come with. Sugars, flours do the exact same thing. I have been, I've been in practice for 12 years, talked to countless people who just, if you stop eating sugar, you start getting headachy. Your body is detoxing. It's a habit that is breaking. And there's some real neurologic problems with whenever you're taking something in that is artificial, that's been refined, it seems to stimulate the brain in weird ways. I just thought that was fascinating that it was that. It literally lit up the brain, the same parts of the brain, at least the pleasure centers part of the brain, as things like cocaine and heroin. So we got to be careful with these things. I am arguing today that basically sugar and flour need to be treated more like a drug and not like a food. It really is, I think, scary for a lot of us to think about how many cans of pop people can drink in a day. That's a drug. It's jacking up our brains. It's controlling our behavior. It's messing with our hormones. All the bread that we eat, the flour that we eat, the sweets that we eat, they're doing the same stinking thing. So we need to cut out some sugar. Okay, big idea number 7. All diets work. I'm not going to sit here today and talk about a specific diet that you need to eat to lose weight. Why? Because they all stinking work. You need to pick one and you need to go all in. The only diet that doesn't work is the one that got you to the place that you're at if you want to lose weight. Here's why all diets work. You can see this on the graphic that I have up here. Every diet, whether you're vegan, whether it's Ornish, whether it's keto diet, whether it's paleo, whether it's Atkins diet, it doesn't matter. They all restrict sugar. They restrict sugar and they restrict processed artificial food, and all of them also increase fiber recommendations. Most of them are, well, I shouldn't say most, all of them are telling you to eat more fiber. Why fiber? Why is fiber a good thing? To get more fiber, you have to eat more fruits and vegetables. That's where it comes from, which means you're getting more nutrients, number one. It's super healthy. Fiber is super healthy for your microbiome, which was all the bacteria that lives in your gut, which we won't get into tonight, but that is massively important for your health. It's massively important for hormones, massively important for your immune system, which is an interesting topic nowadays. And fiber also helps to decrease glycemic index. It means that if you're eating foods with fiber, it slows down, it takes longer to digest, and it slows down how fast the sugar gets dumped into your body. So basically, if you restrict sugar and you increase fiber, you're controlling insulin. You're going to slow down the amount of insulin that you're dumping into your bloodstream. And if you're decreasing the amount of insulin, you're storing less fat. If you're storing less fat, you're burning more weight, right? It's plain and simple. Okay. Really interesting. There was a study that was done by he's a Stanford researcher. His name's Gardner. Stanford researcher. He was a vegetarian for 25 years. When the Atkins diet came out, he hated the Atkins diet. Atkins diet is basically a high-fat, low-carb. It's not quite keto, but it's similar to what we would call keto nowadays. And he hated it. He thought that was going to be killing people and it was going to blow up people's hearts. He thought vegan was the way to go. So he did a study. It was called the A to Z study, and he put groups of people, kept them on this diet for for I don't even remember how long. I think it was 2 years, about 2 years. And there was the Atkins diet, it was the Zone diet, the Ornish diet, the Learn diet. And he, at the very end, he basically studied all these people. And what was he was expecting to find was the high-fat diet, low-carb diet. These people were going to be blowing up with all this inflammation and all these problems. And at the end of this study, he said this was the hardest pill to swallow. And here's what he found is that all diets, it didn't matter which diet you picked, everyone lost weight. So if you picked a diet and you stuck with it over 2 years, you were going to lose weight. The Atkins diet lost the most weight across the board with all people, and they had the best blood work, meaning their outcomes for inflammation, their stress markers, their cholesterol levels, they were the best. So a high-fat diet left your blood in the best shape, and you lost the most weight. What was even more impressive was if you already had insulin resistance, a high-fat diet, you lost 4 times the amount of weight than the other diets. So again, across the board, all the diets worked if you were not insulin resistant. But if you were insulin resistant, the Atkins diet, which again, think paleo or keto, that would be good diets to think of, or the Atkins diet. So Atkins, paleo, keto, those diets, it's really restricted on the amount of sugar, and it's higher in fat with moderate protein. Those diets, you lost 4 times the amount of weight as every other category. Okay, why? Every one of you right now should be thinking because it controlled what? Insulin, right? When you restricted the amount of carbs that you were putting in your body, you controlled your insulin. And if you control your insulin, you're not in storage mode, you're in burning mode. If you're in burning mode, you're simply going to burn more weight. Guys, if you can get this tonight, you will lose weight. If you get your insulin levels back down, calm down, you do that by eating less sugar, less carbs, healthy diets, of course. I don't care which diet you do. I like paleo. It's my favorite diet. It makes the most sense to me. It's the best diet, eating lots of organic fruits and vegetables, lots of fat that come from everything, and moderate amounts of protein. Just be smart with everything. You can track this stuff with calculators that you can input what you're eating to it. But if you decrease your carbs, you are going to lose weight. Okay, so there's the story behind insulin. I hope you guys understand that is the way. If you want to lose weight, this is not working out. We're going to talk about working out in a second, but this is why working out, you don't lose weight working out, right? I'm not saying it's useless, but all that you're doing is burning more calories. Kind of. You do actually help to control hormones when you work out, but it's not for the reasons that people think. When you work out, it's not just about burning extra calories. When you eat, it's not just about eating less calories. All this healthy stuff that we're going to talk about here tonight, it all is about getting your hormones into a burning, growth, repair mode, not a fight or flight, stress, storage mode. Okay? So here's a really cool story. This is a super inspiring story for me. The picture on the right is the David. It was carved by Michelangelo. And if you look at the picture on the left, that's not the exact one, of course, but that's basically what it was carved out of. That Michelangelo, that big piece of block, he carved the David. And I've heard this story. I don't know whether this is true or not, but basically, Michelangelo describes that he had this image of the David so perfectly crystallized in his mind, he didn't really carve the David into the rock. He just chipped away at the rock till he had the David. Meaning that guy, this magnificent statue, was in that rock the whole time. It just took Michelangelo's vision to see it, trust it, and to chip away at what wasn't there to reveal that. I also think it's really interesting about the David. This is a total side story, but it's at the time, according to Michelangelo, the moment that this image that he had of the David was, it was in David, who's, again, this is a biblical story. It wasn't, after he defeated Goliath, and had won the victory, over the Philistines. It was at the moment he decided to stand up and act when no one else would, which I just think is really cool and kind of inspiring. That was the essence of what Michelangelo wanted to get in that picture. or what he wanted to get in that statue was the moment that he decided to do something when no one else would. So I think that's even more inspiring to me. The point of this is that for you to be successful with losing weight, you need to change your identity. I think most of us need an identity change. We get so used to maybe just trusting what we see in the mirror and not understanding who we actually are, what we're supposed to be, and having that vision of who we are. And that identity is so important because our identity changes our actions. The second thing we're going to get into is the tools that Michelangelo used to chip away at this. And we want to make sure that we give you the right tools mentally, practically, so that you can actually create that, you can live out that identity that you're wanting to create. And so that's some homework for you, is what are you trying to create? So what's the purpose of you being on this call? Some of you, hopefully are just doing this because any little bit of health advice and to become a little bit better. You might not have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 pounds to lose, but we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have energy and vitality and health, which is super noble, and congratulations. Some of us may want to lose weight. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm asking you guys to spend a little bit of time figuring out where you want to go and being able to see that in your mind. What do you want to create? This is a little bit corny, but I remember the first time I saw the new James Bond movie with Daniel Craig. It was like the first time it was Daniel Craig. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember there was a scene. I don't know how old I was at the time, but this Daniel Craig was cut and just ripped and like in phenomenal shape. And it's this scene where he's walking out of the ocean, and I'm like, man, that would be good. Like that guy worked for that body, and that guy is in shape. And that literally stuck with me forever. And I'm a long ways from Daniel Craig. Casino Royale, thanks, Matt. I'm a long way from Daniel Craig, but that's a vision that I have, that like if I think about what I want my body to look like, and it's not about vanity. I want my body to be functional and look good so it can do good things. I want to be kicking my kids' butt at sports when I'm 80 and they're 60, and then my grandkids when they're 40 and their great grandkids, good Lord willing. So that's why we want to have this vision, and we want to do the right thing. So spend some time on that. It can be someone else. You can have this vision of yourself, in the future. It doesn't matter, but know where you want to get to, and start to own that identity. So that kind of gets into this. The definition of identity is repeated beingness. So I think most people on this call have heard this term be, do, have, right? That if you want to have a body that you're proud of, you have to do certain things like cut out sugar or whatever. But to do that, you have to become the person first. So when I look at Daniel Craig on Casino Royale, he wasn't lucky that he had six-pack abs at however old he was. That guy had to work for it. He had to engage in behaviors. He knew what he was trying to create. He had to engage in behavior so that he could have the good stuff at the end. So many of us want to flip that circle, and we think like, it's easy for those people to do chin-ups because they're in shape. Well, it wouldn't be easy if they weren't in shape. They had to work hard at getting there. Okay. So I want you to understand that this is about habits, that if you want to turn from a clunk of granite or whatever kind of marble, I don't even know what kind of, stone that was, into the Michelangelo, it's about making small changes, but being consistent and creating habits doing it. You're not going to get anywhere doing anything good for 2 months and then failing. You're rather doing small changes, but being consistent and creating habits. A good question that, I see these bracelets people have, WWJD, what would Jesus do, which is their phenomenal bracelets. And that's a question that I think we can even pose to ourselves when it comes to health related things. So, again, I'm being a little bit silly with this, but, if I have, I can ask myself, what would Daniel Craig do? Right? So like if I've got a choice between having pizza or a salad, okay, what do you think, what would Daniel Craig do? What got him those abs? Probably not eating three entire large pizzas. It was probably being responsible with what he's eating. So asking that question and answering that question as your identity, is what you're trying to become. You might not be that physically yet, but if you can get that mental state, you'll be able to answer that question a lot easier. And so a rubber band, a bracelet, something to remind yourself what your identity is will help this mental transition. We even encourage things like, just remind yourself of this, change your passwords, right, to whatever you want to become. So I can see people on the screen here. So Matt, your new name is Fit Warrior, brother. So you change your passwords, and that's the thing, Fit Warrior or Keto Queen, or, whatever it is, James Bond, in my opinion, right? If I'm just little things to remind yourself every day of what your new identity is, what you're trying to become. Sometimes we have to do things like change our environment. So if we're going to go down a different road when it comes to our health, you know what? Maybe we have to start shopping at a different grocery store, right? If we keep pulling up to the same place that we made bad decisions, it's sometimes easier just to start over. Just start going to a whole new grocery store. This is your new place. This is my healthy grocery store that I go to. Pick different restaurants to eat at. Join a community where what you want to become is the norm. It's really hard, man. If you want to start making changes, and I see this all the time, but especially in your own family, sometimes if you're the one that's going to start making some big changes, other people can try their best to drag you down because they start feeling a little bit self-conscious about these changes that you're making, and maybe they feel a little convicted about that. And it's easier to stop you from reaching your goals than it is for them to pursue theirs. And so we see this all the time that and again, like I said, families, I think, can be the worst for this, but you might have to change the people that you hang around with if they don't push you or support you in trying to create this new identity, this new, or support you in that. So a gym, joining a gym where being in shape and eating the right foods or whatever is the norm, surrounding yourself with friends, having accountability partners. These are all super important things to help you succeed, because again, this is a long-term thing. We run a weight loss program in the office here that, usually we get about 15 to 20 pounds or more weight loss in a month. But my thing to people is we can get that done in 30 days for most people. But if you want to keep that off, you have to understand these changes that have to become the new normal, right? You have to have a new identity. The repeated beingness has to change. Otherwise, you're going to go right back to where you would. So we can help people kickstart this, but in order for it to continue and for you to maintain that, you have to make changes. I'm not a fan at all of people doing anything that's a quick fix. Like, it's way better for you to do this slowly, consistently, but make this long lasting. Then everyone goes on diets and everyone loses weight, and then everyone goes right back to where they were because they didn't stick with it, right? They didn't own it. It didn't become their new identity. I think we've beat that horse enough here. So here's the next one, big idea number 9. We're 56 minutes in here, and I got about 10 minutes to go here, so we're doing good. So 90%, 90%, 90%. So hopefully you guys understand, as we've gone through this stuff, that 90% of if you want to lose weight, that 90% of it comes with the choices of food that you put in your body, not even the amount of food as we talked about. It's the choices of food. This is about, if you want to change your metabolism, the biggest thing that you have to do is this has to come from your nutrition, the foods that you're putting in your body, okay? But we know that, so 90% of your weight loss comes from, or your changes in metabolism, your weight loss comes from nutrition. But to succeed at changing your nutrition, we know that 90% of that is going to be mental. That's why I've spent so much time on the mental side of things and trying to help you guys understand that this is about, you have to change the way that you think as well. What's really interesting is that the mind does not exist in a vacuum. The mind is so dependent on our physiology. And you can have willpower to stop eating, but as I just described with leptin, if you've got a hormone that is not there, that is supposed to be there, telling you that you're full, you're going to be starving all the time. So your physiology is off, and that's causing your brain to constantly tell you that you want food, and no one's got enough willpower to resist that all the time. And so 90% of our psychology comes from our physiology, which is how our bodies actually work. The whole point of this is you have to understand that we have to be holistic about this, that you can't just rely on now not eating the right, or only eating vegetables and get there. there's other things that are going to go into this. So your physiology, we know that your physiology and these hormones are largely affected by things like stress. Okay, so if you want to be successful with weight loss long term, how much stress are you under? So listen, right now, America is in stress. We are in fear right now, right? People are watching the news all the time. We're only getting the bad news. We're not getting the good news. We're not doing the things. We're not moving like we should. Well, here's what's really interesting. I'm sure you guys have seen this too. This is a total side note. I see way more families out now actually walking, getting outside than I ever did pre-quarantine, right? I'm sure you guys, I see some nodding heads here, the same thing. Like, it's amazing to see. So good for everyone. We're all trapped in our homes. It's the only outlet we get. That should be the normal. That's what we should be seeing on our streets all the time, right? Families together, not plugged into work 100% of the time, turning off, getting outside. Our work environment, our finance environment, our relationship environment, these are all things that cause stress. And when your body is stressed, you release hormones like cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that we haven't addressed yet, but cortisol is a hormone you release whenever you're stressed. And cortisol and insulin work hand in hand. Cortisol specifically is a hormone that stores fat in your belly. Okay, it is a centripetal storage hormone. So if you have too much cortisol floating around, if you're stressed all the time, you can eat right, you can do everything that I'm teaching you already, but it's going to be more difficult. And so we have to deal with stress. You have to deal with what's causing the stress. No, you taking an antidepressant and not feeling the stress does not change your physiology one friggin' iota. It changes your perception, the psychological perception of stress. It does not change the hormones that are floating around in your body. Okay? What about sleep? In our weight loss program, we talk about sleep all the time, that if you are not getting 8+ hours of sleep on a nightly basis, that it will be harder for you to lose weight. That's like the best thing you've heard all night. Dr. Jeff is telling me to sleep more and it will help me with weight loss. Yep, and that's what the science shows as well. If you get 4 hours of sleep 2 nights in a row, your insulin sensitivity decreases by 40%, meaning you have to release 40% more insulin to deal with the food that you eat. Interestingly, when you are overtired, you tend to not have the energy to cook the foods that are actually healthy. It's something quick and easy, like pizza, and then finish it off with an ice cream float, right? It's the comfort foods that we tend to eat. And so when we're stressed, when we're sleeping, when we're not sleeping like we should, our hormones change, makes it harder for us to lose weight. Movement. This is where movement comes in. So movement is a wellness tool, not a weight loss tool. Movement is essential. We do a whole workshop. I do a whole workshop, all these things: stress, sleep, movement. We do workshops on all of this, whole separate hour talks on all of these things. So I won't get into this too much, but movement is one of the easiest ways to help your body deal with that little, kind of pain in the butt stress question mark that's affecting your physiology. Exercise has been shown to be twice as effective as an antidepressant, and it's actually good for you. This changes hormone balance in your body. It changes brain function. You will sleep better at night the more movement you get throughout the day. You increasing movement is not about burning more calories. It's about becoming healthier, that if you do not move like you should, that you're unhealthy and your body will be in storage mode. And the same thing with your spine, and your spine and movement are very much tied into this. But when your spine, and this is as a chiropractor, we see this all the time. If your spine is not healthy, if it's stuck, if it's out of alignment, your body will be in more of a fight or flight situation. You release more stress hormones. Things do not work correctly. Even if you're in pain, just being in pain is going to release hormones that it's going to make it harder for you to lose weight. So if we just even stick with the pain part, not even the health part of chiropractic, and the maintenance of your spine, that plays a huge role. So if you want to be successful, you have to understand that you have to tackle anything that creates insulin resistance. And so again, 90% of that's going to come from your nutrition. But 90% of that is your state of mind, which 90% of that is affected by the health of your body and your physiology. And so take care of yourself. That's how you lose weight, is you get healthier. Your weight is the byproduct. We said this at the very beginning. It's the byproduct of how healthy you are. When I see someone carrying around too much weight, it tells me what their overall life is like, not that they ate too many calories. Make sense? Two more. Okay, big idea number 10, bright lines and invisible kryptonite. Bright lines is a legal term. Many of you are familiar with law. This term bright lines came out of the legal world, and basically bright lines is a concept that think about an airplane landing at night. There's bright lines that get lit up so the pilot knows exactly where to land the plane. In a contract, bright lines this is a term that's used to make something so clear that we know what's acceptable and what's not in terms of a contract, right? In your life, what I want you to do is, or to succeed, doesn't matter what I want at all, it matters what you want. If you want to succeed, make it easy on yourself. Have bright lines set up, okay? What this means is have a non-negotiable commitment to something, okay? I don't know if you have someone that's like an alcoholic, for instance, they have to just say no 100% to alcohol. They can't just try and go, oh, I'm going to drink less. It'll never work, right? The first thing that they get taught is like, listen, no more. Forever, no more. Your brain is pickled, right? Once it's pickled, it can't go back. You have to stay away from this completely, okay? There's a great, Jack Canfield is an author, a motivational author, and so I hope none of you have children around. I'm going to say a bad word here in a second. Maybe I'll spell it out. One of his terms that I just love, he says 100% is easy, 99% is a bitch, okay? Meaning that it's much easier just to make a decision to do something or not to do something, not to try and create the mental willpower to convince yourself whether you should do it or not. So what I'm asking you to do is create a bright line. You get to set the rule around this. But maybe your bright line is like, no, I just don't drink pop. So if you're a soda drinker and you want to lose some weight, you can't go probably, I drink 10 cans a week, so now I'm going to go down to 2 cans a week. It's going to be really hard for you to succeed at that for the rest of your life. What I'm asking you to do is don't make it hard. Don't try and convince yourself. Don't have to negotiate with yourself. It's a yes or no thing. No pop, I'm not doing it. I just don't do it. That's part of your identity now. No sugar, no flour. Maybe it's dessert that's your thing. No, I just don't do desserts, right? Not, I'm going to have half a cupcake. How many of you ever have successfully eaten half a cupcake? No one in the history of the planet has ever eaten half a cupcake. You may start with half a cupcake, and what happens? About 3.5 minutes later, you're back to finish that sucker off, okay? It doesn't work. It's too hard. It's mentally impossible. Bright lines. Pick something, pick a couple things, and just say yes or say no, whatever you need to do. Maybe you're going to add something in. Maybe your bright line is, I work out every day. Okay, so you're going to do 10,000 steps every day, or whatever the number is. It's not, I'm going to do it 3 days a week. It's just every day. It's just part of your routine. I get up and I walk, right? It's part of your routine. It's your new identity. It's a bright line. So it's the easiest way to succeed. Go 100% in on something. Don't go 99% because it's going to suck and you're not going to have any fun doing it. And people go, Dr. Jeff, that's extreme. You're no pop. That's extreme. Here's my thing. I think people being on insulin shots for the rest of their life is pretty freaking extreme. I think getting a limb cut off because the blood vessels were destroyed by too much blood sugar, I think that's pretty extreme. I think chemotherapy for cancer, which is the #1 killer in America, and that's our go-to, I think that's pretty extreme. I think bypass surgery is pretty extreme. I think having, the amount of obesity in children that we do right now, I think that's extreme. I don't think saying no to pop is all that extreme. And so again, I think this goes back to the gorilla in the room, and for us to start maybe taking a look at things and really going, yeah, I was really just comfortable with my life. But when you stop and think about it, that's a crazy way to live. And so again, pick some bright lines. That's your homework. Another step of homework. So on to invisible kryptonite. So everyone knows the story about kryptonite, right? Kryptonite is the only thing that can weaken Superman. Now, you can take a big piece of kryptonite and try and poison Superman, but he'll find it and get rid of it. The easiest way to kill Superman would be to crush that kryptonite up into dust and to leave it around him 100% of the time and slowly weaken him and slowly, slowly kill him basically over time. So what I'm asking you to do is find the invisible kryptonite in your life. So what are the things that are making you stumble? This might not be anything big, but this is what's killing you. What's the small things that are killing you over time? And then we have to make habits around this. So here's my point with all of this. Like, I think if you keep buying, or if you have stuff in your cupboards right now that you don't want to eat, having that sit there all the time is invisible kryptonite, right? You don't see it all the time, but every time you open the cupboard, all of a sudden there's a little bit of temptation, there. So if we're gonna go back to the bright lines, again, you gotta find the things that are tripping you up and get rid of them. You have to find the kryptonite, find what's weakening you, and get rid of it. Get rid of the kryptonite. So here's some things. If you want to make a habit, if you want to build a habit, you need to make it obvious. So for instance, if you want to walk every single day, the first thing that I would do is put my shoes right beside my bed. So as soon as you get out of bed, there is your running shoes to go for a walk. Okay, make that cue blatantly obvious. You cannot wake up in the morning without seeing your shoes. You need to make it a routine, and you need to make that routine easy. I read this book called Mini Habits. So I know this is opposite of what I'm telling you here, but I'm just telling you how to build a habit, and then we're going to get rid of a habit here in a second. I read this book called Mini Habits. So again, saying that you're going to get up and walk 10,000 steps, or that you're going to never eat sugar again is that's a big habit. That's a big thing that may be hard for you to form, because it only takes once for you not to do that, and all of a sudden you failed. Your habit, to build a habit, might be, I'm just going to put my shoes on in the morning. So you're going to start walking in the morning. My shoes are right beside my bed. Then all I'm going to do is put my shoes on. That's my only job. And you've succeeded for the day. One time I was doing this after I read the book, and I'm like, all right, I want to start doing push-ups. So my habit was to only do one push-up. That was it. It was a mini habit. But how many times do you think I ever only did one push-up? Never. Because once I got down and did a push-up, I'm like, well, I'm already here. I remember being sick, like having the flu, and I still did push-ups because all I had to start with was one. It would have taken me more mental work to convince myself not to get down and do one stinking push-up than it took to actually do the push-up. Okay, so you make this routine easy, and then you need to have a reward that's satisfying. You need to reward yourself. Okay, so if you want to break a habit, let's say your habit is ice cream every single night, or dessert, or a can of pop. Now we have to make it hidden. So your cue to open a can of pop, don't have that cue. Again, don't have pop in your fridge so that every time you open it, you have to say no to it. Don't buy the stuff at the grocery store. Don't even bring it home. If you have stuff in your cupboards right now, get rid of it. Donate it to a food bank. I don't even know if they're open right now, but give it to people who will eat it. Okay, you're poisoning them. Shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. But just don't eat it yourself. Just get it out of your house. Okay, so make that cue hidden. Break that habit. And then make it difficult. So for you to get it, again, if you don't have pop, if you want to go get pop to drink, that means you're going to have to leave your house, get in your car, drive to the grocery store, literally feel shame, and hopefully have Dr. Jeff on your shoulder the whole drive there telling you like, oh, you're making a big mistake. Don't do this. You're making a big mistake. Okay, so you want to make it difficult to be able to get that habit. And then you want to make it unsatisfying, right? So this is where I think having accountability partners comes in, and someone that you can be honest with. You should have to tell your accountability partner that, yep, I broke down and drank a can of Coke, okay? At least yourself, you're not going to enjoy that can of Coke as much. 7x equals 150. Remember that? 7 times the amount of the risk of diabetes if you had one, it would have been 150 calories, from sugar. So make that unsatisfying. Know those stats. That's why I gave them to you, because I want you to understand this. Okay, and then rule number 5 is this, or point 5 on this is this. If you do 1% better every single day, you're like, in 2 years, you're like 37 times better if you do the math on that. It's like compound interest for getting better. Every day, do a little bit better, do a little bit better. Don't have to make big changes all at once, but every day, if you get a little bit better and a little bit better, you're going to make a massive difference over the course of your life. And again, that kind of ties into a little bit with our last big idea. Your greatest return on investment here is not to try and change one thing completely. but is to do a little bit in all areas of your life. Here's what I mean. Robert Lustig, we talked about him earlier. He was the endocrinologist at UFC who did that. He was the 7x = 150 guy. He did another study, and he found that if people only increased their exercise by 15 minutes a day, but they did that for 8 years, they added over 3 years to their lifespan, right? 3 years or 15 minutes a day, that's it. That's tiny. If you do it consistently for 8 years, you're going to add 3 years to your lifespan. Here's how you get the greatest return on investment. Imagine making some changes with your diet, some changes with your sleep, some changes with the health of your spine and your nervous system, changes with your identity and your mindset, change your inflammation levels in your body, right? Get more exercise, start taking your vitamins, do whatever you need to do. If you make little changes, just like with the exercise, little bits of changes, but you do it consistently over time, that compounds. It gets so big. That's how you get to be optimally healthy, okay? And again, I know that we're off the weight loss thing here, but the weight's going to come off. If you guys just do what we talk about, decreasing the sugar, doesn't mean you're going to get 20 pounds in a month, but the weight's going to start coming off, I promise, okay? And it gets even better. The weight gets even better if you start doing these other things, because your body gets healthier. And then if your body gets healthier, everything gets better. 2/3 of all bankruptcies are caused by medical expenses. I always tell people, listen, would you rather end up on a cruise ship or in a nursing home? We're all living longer. I see so many people that live in miserable health for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 years of their life because they didn't take care of themselves. They didn't understand health correctly the first 30, 40, 50 years of their life. Be smart, be consistent, diet, sleep, spine, mindset. We do workshops on all these. Like us on Facebook. We promote this stuff on there. If you're not, we have a lot of people registered for this that aren't patients. And so, if you're not a patient, you don't have to be a patient to get what we're teaching in this office. It's simple. You don't have to pay anyone for this stuff. You want your spine adjusted, that you got to pay me for. But everything else you get to do on your own, man. You don't have to pay a gym to exercise 15 minutes a day. No one gyms are open right now. It's less convenient, that's for sure, but I'm still working out. I do it with my staff in the office, okay? It's not what I did before, but we're moving, trust me, more than 15 minutes a day too, okay? So there's ways to do it. So that's it. Normally I do 10 big ideas. I added one extra big idea because I wanted to try and tie that last part in. Make changes, change your identity, get your bright lines, tell someone what your commitments are, right? Help get an accountability partner. Tell me, I'm probably the worst accountability partner because I have zero sympathy. So if you don't do it, you'll hear it from me if you're not doing things correctly. My wife's much more, I don't know, empathetic than I am. But tell me, I'd love to help you out. You can send an email with all this stuff and you let me know, and I will follow up with you on that. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to unmute everyone or allow time for questions here if you guys have questions. I will send an email after this as well. What I'm talking about now has nothing to do with this information. If you implement this, you don't need me. You will lose weight. You will be successful. Just follow what we recommend here. Follow what we say. Here, I need to show myself here. Now you can see me again. I'm back in the Bahamas. You don't need me for this sort of stuff, right? You've got the information. You can do it. Just be consistent. We do have a program that does cost money, but it's a 30-day program that kicks butt. It deals with inflammation levels. There's other things that we talked about here we couldn't get into tonight, but gut bacteria plays a role in this. Stress hormones plays a role in this. Vitamin D levels plays a role in this. Other hunger hormones like ghrelin that we didn't talk about tonight that play a role in your success of this. If you need a kickstart, you want to see something happen really quickly, like I said, we're getting 15, 20 plus pounds a month for the majority of people. And if you have questions about that, we can do virtual consults now where we can talk about where you're at and what you want. And we can help you get there. If you don't want to do it, that quickly, just do what we recommend, and I promise you, you're going to see the same changes. It's just going to take longer to get there, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to do really good. If you want to kickstart, let me know, and we can talk about what that looks like, what the program looks like, who's a candidate, who's not, etc. I'll send an email out to everyone after this, and if you want, just reply back. It's really easy, and we'll go from there, because I want to make sure there's people that need help and need action. We've got programs that are going to work for you that are a little more in-depth, and we're really watching you. We're doing measurements of body fat index and everything like that. It's a little more customized to kind of getting this done a little bit quicker. So, okay, I'm going to unmute everyone. Let's